The story you're about to see deals with a topic that may be too sensitive for younger viewers. This special edition of Channel 1 News was produced and is intended for high school audiences only.
I think it's crazy. I never thought that it'd be like this in Jamestown, New York.
In a small, close community, a nightmare scenario.
This guy came in here and shot 8 or 10 people or 20 or whatever else with a different kind of bullet.
That guy was a man with a long criminal record. The victims were mostly teenagers, and the bullet was HIV.
I didn't think it could happen to a small town like this, but it can happen anywhere.
Hundreds of teenagers thought they were safe from AIDS.
You learn about it in health class, but you never think it's going to affect you.
But now, in this small town, that myth has been destroyed. In a way, our story today is really about credibility, what you actually believe can happen to you. It involves a deadly disease and the grief one person can bring to an entire community. But even more than that, it's about teenagers who, like a lot of other students all over the country, lived under a false sense of security about AIDS. They thought that because they weren't homosexual and didn't use IV drugs, they were somehow immune from AIDS. Now, those beliefs could cost some of them their lives. In rural Chautauqua County, New York, AIDS has always been a rarity. Doctors see maybe a case or two a year. But in the past few months alone, more than 10 people here have tested positive for HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. And almost all of those cases have been traced back to one man. The story begins in New York City, in one of the worst neighborhoods. Some people are able to rise above the noise and dirt of these streets to achieve success. This man wasn't one of them. His name, Newshawn Williams, also known as Face, Shytique Johnson, or JoJo. His police record tells his story. By the age of 17, he had been charged or convicted of crimes including robbery, auto theft, and selling crack cocaine. Basically, a career criminal. And last year, he found a new place to call home. It's a place far removed from the mean streets of the big cities, the community of Jamestown. Newshawn Williams had relatives here, and in the summer of 1996, this is where he moved. He had changed locations, but he didn't change his habits. Williams liked to hang out in local parks where young people would gather. This was one of his favorite haunts, a place just across the street from a high school, where he would sell drugs and make friends with local girls. It turns out that Newshawn Williams had a lot of girlfriends, and many of them became sexual partners. What's more, he and his partners seem to have a habit of ignoring the conventional advice against having unprotected sex. Last summer, when he was at the county clinic being treated for a minor ailment, Williams voluntarily took a test for HIV. The results were positive. He gave authorities the names of more than 24 women he'd had sex with, but he claimed to have been with 50 and maybe more. Almost all of them were teenagers. Now, county health officials faced a challenge beyond their wildest nightmares. Who else had Newshawn Williams infected, and how far had those people carried the virus? There could be dozens, even hundreds of people who might have been exposed and who might not even know it. Chautauqua County prepared for the worst. Under New York state law, the names of people who test positive for HIV are kept confidential. But when county authorities found out the full extent of what Newshawn Williams did and how bad the situation really was, they couldn't keep quiet anymore.
We are faced today with the most serious public health problem that most of us who live and work in Chautauqua County have ever seen.
Within hours of the announcement, posters of Newshawn Williams went up all over the county. For many people, his face was tragically familiar. The next day, more than 100 people showed up here at the county health clinic for HIV testing, and within a week, hundreds more would follow. For many teenagers, this became a place they would come to fear and ultimately dread.
So now there's kind of a guessing game here in Jamestown. Just exactly how many teenagers have been infected with the HIV virus. It depends on whom you ask. Some say dozens, others say hundreds. How many teenagers in Jamestown do you think have been infected by the HIV virus?
The rumor said that about 100 people, I guess.
Last time I heard, it was like 75 girls.
No,
900.
There's at least 100 people that have contracted it, not just through him, but through other people that he slept with.
You can sleep with one person, that person's got it. It just branches out all over the place.
There was 28 who were directly infected, and then there was 53 who were indirectly affected because from those girls they had sex with them, and then somehow they got to a number 98.
And it really didn't matter anymore how the virus had come. Chautauqua County was coming to grips with what had become a modern-day plague.
There are more questions than there are answers. Why us? Why here? What went wrong?
How did an HIV outbreak happen in Jamestown? Was it ignorance, a lack of education about AIDS, or was it just the worst kind of bad luck? Some people began to wonder, what was so different about this town?
The answer is nothing. There's nothing fundamentally different about this small town in western New York than any other town of its size in Florida, Ohio, Georgia, Texas, or anywhere. The AIDS education system is in place. Teenagers that I talked to could tell me all about HIV. Parents are aware of it, and teachers know it too. The point is, teenagers here in Jamestown knew that HIV infection could happen. They just never thought it would happen to them.
The reason why it happened here is because no one suspected it, and people thought that just because it was a little town that they weren't going to catch anything that big that they couldn't get rid of, and they just didn't use condoms, and mainly they just didn't care. You learn about it in health class, but you never think it's going to affect you. I don't think anybody ever thinks it, and then when they get it, then it's a different story.
This is a big shock because this is a small town. There's nothing really that ever happens here. Maybe 1 or 2 fights, and that's the big news. But this is a shock to everyone, the parents, the children, teenagers mostly.
But it's no shock to Kathleen Whitmore, Chautauqua County's AIDS education director.
Why do you think teenagers are still having unprotected sex?
That's the million-dollar question. Just because they think that it cannot happen to them. I don't really think they see the true picture of AIDS, of the person, in the hospital bed, very, very sick. Just that I don't think that they think it can happen to them.
Why Jamestown?
It's happening everywhere. It's just that it just got some media attention because of the circumstances on how it happened. But this is happening as we speak, I'm sure.
And it's not any different than any other town in America?
Not one bit. Not one bit.
If there's a bright spot to all of this, it's that the message about HIV and AIDS is finally getting through loud and clear, in Chautauqua County at least. I spent the better part of a week in Jamestown, and every student I talked to said they would never look at AIDS the same way again. These 2 Jamestown teenagers are learning a hard lesson. Some of the people closest to them are now HIV positive.
It's shocking to find out one of your friends is going to die in a few years, Not expected. You never thought it'd happen to one of your friends or you.
What would you say to the millions of teenagers out there who are in small towns like Jamestown and think it's never going to come here?
Just because you're in a small town doesn't mean that it ain't going to come to you, because it will. Eventually, there's going to be people everywhere that'll have it, so you should just be careful.
What do you think this has done to Jamestown?
It's tore it apart. I mean, no one really, everyone looks at everyone weird, If, maybe that person might have it, and that person might have it, everyone don't look at everyone the same way as they used to before this happened.
And this is sending a big message to everyone, and I feel that it can help. Even though it's too bad for the ones that did get AIDS from face or whatever. But I think it's going to send a big message to a lot of kids, and a lot more kids will be more safe and more protection. And that's what we need.
This week, a lot of people in Chautauqua County, New York, are getting themselves ready for what could be some very bad news. Around 450 people there will get their AIDS test results back from the state lab in Albany. At our deadline, more than 1,100 had taken that test, and so far, 11 of them, including one male, have tested positive for HIV. The county health commissioner told me that he expects that number to rise. If you think you might have reason to take an AIDS test, or you know someone who does, you can call this number. It's the National AIDS Awareness Hotline at 1-800-342-AIDS. That's 1-800-342-AIDS. And that's our show for now. We will have more Channel 1 News tomorrow. Take care. The world has lived with, been possessed by the AIDS epidemic for the better part of a quarter of a century. But each new case of acquired immune deficiency syndrome still comes as a shock. Today, we take you to a small town that thought it was safe from AIDS. That town was wrong. In rural Chautauqua County, New York, AIDS has always been a rarity. Doctors see maybe a case or two a year. But in the past few months alone, more than 10 people here have tested positive for HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. And almost all of those cases have been traced back to one man. The story begins in New York City, in one of the worst neighborhoods. Some people are able to rise above the noise and dirt of these streets to achieve success. This man wasn't one of them. His name, Newshawn Williams, also known as Face, Shaitik Johnson, or JoJo. His police record tells his story. By the age of 17, he had been charged or convicted of crimes including robbery, auto theft, and selling crack cocaine. Basically, a career criminal. And last year, he found a new place to call home. It's a place far removed from the mean streets of the big cities, the community of Jamestown. Newshawn Williams had relatives here, and in the summer of 1996, this is where he moved. He had changed locations, but he didn't change his habits. Williams liked to hang out in local parks where young people would gather. This was one of his favorite haunts, a place just across the street from a high school, where he would sell drugs and make friends with local girls. It turns out that Newshawn Williams had a lot of girlfriends, and many of them became sexual partners. What's more, he and his partners seem to have a habit of ignoring the conventional advice against having unprotected sex. Last summer, when he was at the county clinic being treated for a minor ailment, Williams voluntarily took a test for HIV. The results were positive. He gave authorities the names of more than 24 women he'd had sex with, but he claimed to have been with 50 and maybe more. Almost all of them were teenagers. Now, county health officials faced a challenge beyond their wildest nightmares. Who else had Newshawn Williams infected, and how far had those people carried the virus? There could be dozens, even hundreds of people who might have been exposed and who might not even know it. Chautauqua County prepared for the worst. Under New York state law, the names of people who test positive for HIV are kept confidential. But when county authorities found out the full extent of what Newshawn Williams did and how bad the situation really was, they couldn't keep quiet anymore.
We are faced today with the most serious public health problem that most of us who live and work in Chautauqua County have ever seen.
Within hours of the announcement, posters of Newshawn Williams went up all over the county. For many people, his face was tragically familiar. The next day, more than 100 people showed up here at the county health clinic for HIV testing, and within a week, hundreds more would follow. For many teenagers, this became a place they would come to fear and ultimately dread.
There are more questions than there are answers. Why us? Why here? What went wrong?
How did an HIV outbreak happen in Jamestown? Was it ignorance, a lack of education about AIDS, or was it just the worst kind of bad luck? Some people began to wonder, what was so different about this town?
The answer is nothing. There's nothing fundamentally different about this small town in western New York than any other town of its size in Florida, Ohio, Georgia, Texas, or anywhere. The AIDS education system is in place. Teenagers that I talked to could tell me all about HIV. Parents are aware of it, and teachers know it too. The point is, teenagers here in Jamestown knew that HIV infection could happen. They just never thought it would happen to them.
The reason why it happened here is because no one suspected it, and people thought that just because it was a little town that they weren't going to catch anything that big that they couldn't get rid of, and they just didn't use condoms, and mainly they just didn't care.
You learn about it in health class, but you never think it's going to affect you. I don't think anybody ever thinks it, and then when they get it, then it's a different story.
This is a big shock because this is a small town. There's nothing really that ever happens here. Maybe 1 or 2 fights, and that's the big news. But this is a shock to everyone, the parents, the children, teenagers mostly.
But it's no shock to Kathleen Whitmore, Chautauqua County's AIDS Education Director.
Why do you think teenagers are still having unprotected sex?
That's the million-dollar question. Just because they think that it cannot happen to them. I don't really think they see the true picture of AIDS, of the person, you know, in the hospital bed, very, very sick. Just that I don't think that they think it can happen to them.
Why Jamestown?
It's happening everywhere. It's just that it just got some media attention because of the circumstances on how it happened. But this is happening as we speak, I'm sure.
And it's not any different than any other town in America?
Not one bit. Not one bit.
If there's a bright spot to all of this, it's that the message about HIV and AIDS is finally getting through loud and clear. In Chautauqua County, at least. I spent the better part of a week in Jamestown, and every student I talked to said they would never look at AIDS the same way again. These two Jamestown teenagers are learning a hard lesson. Some of the people closest to them are now HIV positive.
It's shocking to find out one of your friends is going to die in a few years, you know. Not expected. You never thought it'd happen to one of your friends or you.
What would you say to the millions of teenagers out there who are in small towns like Jamestown and think it's never going to come here?
Just because you're in a small town doesn't mean that it ain't going to come to you, because it will. Eventually, there's going to be people everywhere that'll have it, so you should just be careful.
What do you think this has done to Jamestown?
It's tore it apart. I mean, no one really, everyone looks at everyone weird, you know? If, oh, maybe that person might have it, and that person might have it, you know, everyone don't look at everyone the same way as they used to before this happened.
And this is sending a big message to everyone, and I feel that it can help. Even though it's too bad for the ones that did get AIDS from face or whatever, but I think it's going to send a big message to a lot of kids, and a lot more kids will be more safe and more protection, and that's what we need.
Wherever you live, if you think you might have reason to take an AIDS test or you know someone who does, you can call the National AIDS Awareness Hotline. That number is 1-800-342-AIDS.